Welcome to my session. So basically, with this session, what we are trying to tackle here is the ability that is held with big data and the challenges that we encounter while we are processing big data, and also not only just processing, but there are so many other aspects as to which are related to the hardware which we use in order to host our big data applications. So the motivation to join this session would be that we should first understand how big data are processed. I mean, what kind of data are actually there, right? And what are the challenges basically that not only the use cases that we're going to deliver, but the technologies or the tech stack that people are utilizing in order to in order to use big data. What are the challenges basically that we face, right? And what are the complexities which are part of those tech stacks, right? So this would be the aim of my of this particular session. Here we are only going to talk about the different challenges in different aspects. For example, in processing, what kind of processing, and if we are considering the input, then what kind of input do we usually get in big data. So this is the agenda. These four things that we're going to talk about mainly. So the first one is about the rise of big data, which most of us are already aware about, but just we're going to look at it one more time. Then challenges faced with big data. So what are the different challenges when we face while we are inputting the big data to the system, or when we are processing it with any other technology or application that we have coded, or any third party libraries that we use. Then spatial big data systems. So mainly the point here is that we are going to stress more on the spatial big data systems. Spatial big data systems are those systems which take into consideration the data regarding locations. For example, if you have heard of queries like find me a restaurant near my house, near my location, or find me a restaurant around 30-kilometer radius. So those are the kind of queries that are being asked to spatial big data systems. And spatial big data systems use a different type of data called spatial data, right, which consists of information regarding the location. For example, Google Earth, Google Map, all those applications use this kind of data. And then how can we effectively process this spatial data? So this involves partitioning, which is a very good very effective way to handle big data inputs. So moving on, so let's take a look at the rise of big data. So the rise of big data is because of is coupled with the rise of internet, right? As much as internet has has expanded throughout, the more data we see being floating around. So the big data paradigm has changed a variety of fields. So for example, there is agriculture, which they are trying to revolutionize by proper planning is one of the things which agriculture faces. And it's a constant challenge with the in the life of a particular farmer. If they have overbought something, then this is a loss for them, like, right? And there is no other thing which can which can help them in order to judge whether how what kind of weather it is. Like there must be a little bit of ideas, but those are really traditional and not something which is based on calculations, or right. So that's why this is one of the challenge. And then we have retail sector, which is now totally technology driven. As we see that e-commerce is one of those businesses which is relying on big data, because they want to understand what kind of customers they have, and to understand those customers they want to understand the demographics, like where do they live, what is their taste, right? So all those recommendation services, for example, whenever, even in music, we have recommendation services included. For example, if you have like any like YouTube is a streaming application, right? YouTube would like to suggest you content more around the location where you are in. For example, if you're in India, then you will get Indian YouTubers more in your feed, If you are one of those people who rely on gaming and you would like to watch streamings from different gamers, then your feed will dynamically change according to your need. So all of that is trying to read data, and that particular data is called big data. So big data can be structured in a case where it has a very predefined model, right? This model means that it has a predefined set of fields which says that, which is equivalent to a SQL schema, which is very hard map of a data that you want to accept. If the data does not follow those schemas, then it won't be accepted by the database at all. But then there is an unstructured type of data which is purely made up of these mm, text fields, for example details regarding customers. And mostly that now that we use Elasticsearch, we come across this system which utilizes dynamic mapping, which means that you can create maps on the fly, and you don't have to rely on very rigid schemas for the data, right? So data which is flowing may or may not have those fields, but it will still be stored in the database itself. So although it is a very convenient situation that you can that kind of data, but it's really hard to map it with all other kind of data, because they may be structured. So you see, the challenge here is that there are data which is structured, and then there are data which is not structured at all. So in the rise of big data, IoT played a major role. Why? Because there is a huge amount of data which is being collected through these devices. So there are satellites and imaging devices which are being used. I guess one of the projects that we had, RCCL, and if I remember this correctly, Sudeep told me that they use the satellites in order to gather data. And so that kind of data is truly spatial. That is, it tries to gather the image of a globe, and it tries to turn it into digital stuff. And the translation from what you see to digital is really, really hard. Why? Because there are numerous fields which are involved in it. You have to consider the shape of the of the region that you're trying to monitor. So those kind of challenges are there, and that is the spatial data. And then there are development of sensors and mobile devices allowed, which collect the massive amount of data. For example, today, if you see the phone, you will find a lot of sensors inbuilt in it. There is a sensor for gravity. There is a sensor for taking in the location and reading all of that stuff. So that also has contributed in this rise as well, and people are reading it as well. So a lot of recommendation systems are based on a location. So these days, which utilize this highly magnified data, as I've already said. So if you look at Amazon, they provide you with this product, this product, product wise, what do you call it? Suggestions, like on what kind of product that you may or may not require, right? And provide you with a regional based suggestion. The increase in processing is fueling, and the need to collect more data is also there, right? So the more data you collect, you have to process it, right? So as much as devices you can have many devices, right? But if you don't have a very convincing architecture for processing, it would fail to provide you the optimal output that you're expecting to, right? So what are the challenges that we face with big data? So first of all, there is a large volume of n-dimensional data. So n-dimensional data means that a data that you're getting, but there are so many fields residing in it. For example, if you consider maps, a map is an application which gathers the data from the locations, from the location sensors. So these location sensors not only provide you the area details, but they also provide you the pictures as well. These pictures consist of shapes and sizes of varied scales, right? And they may have so many irregularities. So those irregularities need to be translated into fields which can keep the account of that. For example, each shape, if you consider in a 2D scale, consists of a x-axis and y-axis, right? So those x-axis and y-axis tend to change a lot if you magnify your map, right? So for example, if you're looking at a Google map right now, it would on the surface it will show you the earth as a collective, which is not a problem, and everything is very rigid. Now if you magnify to one location specifically, and you deep down go deep into that, the scale would change, and with the scale change, the data plots will also change, the shape will increase. So to keep rendering those kind of images, you need the constant flow of data, and those flow of data is n dimensional, that it consists of scaling details, and it also consists of those details like which details should be part of a particular frame. For example, if you're viewing a window, then which pixel should be shown and which pixel should not be shown, like those. This is one of the hypothetical example which we can consider. Then we have a high compute complexity. If you see, really, now compute intensity rises if there are so many features. For example, if you consider structured data, and if there are 100 fields in that structured data, processing here means joining the data. Basically, join is considered one of the most costly operations. So if you consider SQL as an example, if you want to find the customers which reside in Delhi, so there must be a join operation which we should utilize, right? So in this case, if you have 100 fields, that compute intensity would already rise, right? But that is the case of structured data. But if you consider the case of unstructured data, where some of the fields may be omitted or may not even be read, this becomes a little more tough, because then we have to use some kind of predictive analysis in order to predict, like, okay, this particular user may reside in this locality, or this particular user may reside in that, right? So the intensity of computation increases, and also the cost of your infrastructure. Now there is a very good filtering mechanisms, which spatial data or any kind of data which considers the demographics of customers and all that. They utilize this called my minimum bounding rectangles. So the minimum bounding rectangles, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the slide. So this helps you in filtering the data, and there is an algorithm called R-tree algorithm, which is utilized in all of these technologies. So right, so there are particular challenges with this, with the use of minimum bounding rectangles as well, which we will consider. So next is the complex spatial queries. So spatial queries, for example, finding the restaurant nearby to you, or which is nearby in duration, in terms of duration, like 5 to 10 minutes from your location. This is the complex spatial query. How is it complex? Because now you have a large amount of data. First, you have to consider Earth as the whole huge sphere of data. Now now we have to first deep down to your location. So we have your location with us, right? Which we do not need to scan for. And now what we have to scan though is the actual location, which is 5 to 10 minutes closer to you. In doing so, we have to move from one plane to another plane. Consider it like the hierarchical structure, where your let's say, for example, if you look at Earth, now we have to deep down to, let's say, India, right? And first we have to deep down to Asia, then we go to India, and then from India, Delhi, then Delhi, Noida. So that kind of hierarchical operation is required. So there is a data structure which allows us to do that, and there is a, sorry, not data structure, but not data structure in a sense, but an algorithm which allows us to effectively do that, and it's being utilized by a lot of systems which are modern. For example, Hadoop utilizes it, Spark utilizes those. A modification of this is being utilized, of that algorithm is utilized. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. So the requirements in processing this kind of data can be boiled down to these two. So the first one is the faster query response. Obviously, if you're stuck somewhere and you would like to know how much time will it take for you to reach there, rather than relying on your own quantitative aptitude, you would prefer that already defined system would do that for you. I mean, that's what technology is for ultimately. But if that technology is taking, let's say, 1 hour to answer your query, then that's not effective at all. Then you would require faster query response. So faster query response depends on the quality of data and also on the processing architecture that we have set up. Next, the cost effective architecture. Now the first point was to get faster query response, but that does make you blind to the fact that how much cost is being fed to the system that you have developed. You can give it as many money, and you would require maybe at a certain point very small, throughput. In order to make it a little bit more effective, you have to constrain it by cost, right? You can write APIs and you can write more expressive queries, whatever gives you the edge, right? For example, researchers who try to research on the basis of spatial data prefer that they write very expressive queries, while we, as in whatever the architecture, whatever the application that we are using right now, we do not use queries a lot. We have APIs, we have microservices. We just tend to post a simple API and post to a simple API endpoint, whatever the query that I want to ask, and it just gives us the data. So basically, writing expressive queries means that you can optimize those queries, whereas posting to an API means that you have to handle the query optimization yourself, or the application has to do it itself, right? So what would help us is that there should be a framework which would allow us to first manage or arrange our data in a way which is very faster to traverse through. Also, there must be a way that it should allow us to effectively modify our query in a way that it is okay, it's faster. Or we can just use a very effective way of writing queries, where we may or may not face blockages. For example, SQL, the queries can be written as complex as you want, but if you want to optimize those queries, that's a big challenge to do that. So with spatial data, as I said, that we are reading data regarding the locations and all. So how many technologies are there? How many techniques are there in order to solve the query response time? So there are two approaches. So first one is the parallel DBs. Parallel DBs are the most modern type of application, or modern type of, sorry, frameworks of databases, where the data is partitioned and is available as replicas on multiple disks, as you must have seen in Elasticsearch or Solar, right? There are shards, there are maintenance of shards, and search engines utilize those shards in terms of in order to answer your queries in a much faster way, because since the data is replicated, the data is highly available. Once the data is highly available, you don't have to actually look for it to the original source of that data, or the original or the primary region of the data, in order to answer such questions. Now, parallel DBs. So parallel DBs do suffer from a lot of major drawbacks. So first one is parallel DBs. Okay, it'd be better if I discuss this a little bit later. So let's come back to the MapReduce based system. Sorry. So the MapReduce based systems are usually used for unstructured data, which is very flat and not dimensional enough. So that this is another technique which we will revisit again. But the similarity between those is that they share nothing, as in, what if they want to process a particular query, they don't share the query with among each other. There are no dependencies, like I have to depend on something else, because the data is replicated and is partitioned among the various disks. And obviously, so the shared nothing is only possible with threading, because if we use multi-threading, we'll be able to process we'll be able to process the requests much more faster, rather than if we take only one huge request and never dissect it, or never distribute it among different cores, right? So partitioning is one of the most critical feature, which is common in both of these approaches. Partitioning allows the data to be distributed among several data nodes that you have in your particular DB cluster. So there are some limitations with the parallel DB. First of all, that it reduces. This is one of the advantages. It's actually not the disadvantage, but there is a hidden disadvantage here. So it reduces the bottlenecks. That's for sure. How does it reduce the bottleneck, IO bottleneck? Because there are multiple data residing on multiple disks. But the point is that you have to have a lot of data nodes for this. Because if your data rises in number, you may have to add a lot of other nodes. It calls for storage being increased, or the cost of storage will get increased, right? So that's how it's a little bit of a limitation there. With parallel DBs, there is no optimization in terms of computation. Optimization, as in, is there a way for you to write a optimal query? There is no. Why? Because that is being handled by the framework itself. How will it process it? And it depends upon their master nodes and coordinators nodes. So whenever you see, like, Elasticsearch is a very diverse, now that it has become a little bit diverse in its architecture, that it utilizes master, it utilizes transport nodes and also coordinator nodes in order to answer your queries more effectively, and provide you the answer in a very short time. So those kind of things are dependent upon the optimization, which is done by the framework itself and not by the query writer, right? And also there is this like parallelization. So to reduce the bottlenecks that we have with IO bottlenecks, so there is this algorithm called R-tree, which utilizes the minimum bounding rectangles, which I talked about. So minimum bounding rectangles are these. So consider this as a continent. Let's consider these countries as, for example, A, B, C are those countries, and this is your map, right? Let's say somebody queries and they are particularly here. According to the location, they are residing here, right? This is called tiling, right? Each of these squares, these evenly divided squares, are called tiles. So each tile consists of data for a particular region. This tile consists of data for a particular region. This is your query window, which is trying to find the which is trying to query the location here. Let's say, for example, the person wants to query that okay, I want to find the closest location to me. So the closest location to me would only be found if I search this particular region, like this particular window that we have, right? For example, let me get the pointer, like this particular window that we have, right? Only then, God, only then it would be possible to answer this question. Now, if we boil down to this particular window, we'll see that there are two regions which are closest, and we can utilize the data of either of these regions in order to answer the query, or whichever is closer. So this square box is actually the vicinity of your query, that in how much closer do you want your locations to reside in. So you can utilize these areas in order to answer your questions, right? So
So you're just creating a so you're using a bin lattice to check the distance between or among objects,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So now the division between this, since this is a very 2D rectangular triangle, and these are very rigid shapes, right? They don't actually. Sorry, is my screen visible again?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So now this is a very rigid shape, right? Even if you magnify now, these things will not be changing enough. But if you consider Earth as the data source, you see that Earth rotates, right? If you're and also whatever the sensors, whatever the satellites that you throw outside the or at the surface of Earth, they also revolute at a particular time interval with a particular speed. So you see there may be irregularities, because then the shape will change, and those shape changes will be irregular because you won't know at what speed you would want to run, right? And these shape changes will somehow, what they would do, that a particular region may or may not overlap, right? Mostly the cases that the particular service will overlap among the different tiles. For example, if you consider this particular region, it is common between these two tiles, right? Now, a region which is common means that you have to store it in both of the tiles, right? It should be part of this tile as well, and it should be part of this tile as well. This introduces double of your cost of your storage. Also, when you're processing it, If you boil down to this particular tile, then you will have a duplicate, because this same data would reside in this tile as well, right? In order to deduplicate, you have to process it again, right? So the processing cost is also increased by +1, or whatever is your algorithm. So judging by your algorithm, the cost will be cost will be the worst case cost, or worst case speed. So you see, like, overlapping figures will be a challenge in case of spatial data, and will incur the cost on storage as well as on processing. With processing, we there is a way that we can, there are two approaches to handle this. But in terms of storage, there is also a way for us to, actually effectively handle this kind of situation of overlapping. Now, for processing, we have parallelization. Parallelization is dependent upon the architecture you have. For example, if you have CPUs, and if your CPU is a multi-core CPU, then you can actually process the queries using threads. And as we see, like, most of the applications that we are developing right now are threaded, right? They are multi-threaded. So even if you're using Akka or whatever that you're doing, there are alternatives which sound like threads. I mean, they are threads ultimately. So because parallelization can only be achieved if you process it with the help of threads. Now, this hardware architecture is composed of GPU and CPU nodes as well. So they are proposing that a particular hosting machine should have GPUs and CPUs. And most of the, I think most of the systems that we are using right now, for example, the Google Map system is also hosted on such nodes for processing where there are GPU nodes. The advantage of GPU nodes is that they have that they provide as compared to CPUs, right? And the way to do and the processing speed gets like almost 2 to 3 times more as compared to a host with just CPU, with just CPU cores available. But the thing with this is, like, the support of heterogeneous architecture is not yet mature enough that we can actually utilize this. There are some causes which there is actually a very huge challenge in order to utilize heterogeneous hardware architecture where we have CPU and GPUs, which we'll discuss. So rather, the case with parallel DB still is there, but till then we have MapReduce, which does this work with CPU nodes a little bit effectively. So with MapReduce, we have high scale and parallel processing both. But the thing with this is that it helps us process unstructured data, which is to be flat. There are alternatives which can help us with processing multidimensional data, but that would only incur a little bit of processing overhead. It relies on partitioning a lot. So with partitioning, what do we mean by partitioning is actually to divide this thing in uh, this in these particular tiles. This is what partitioning is about. Right. So the actual processing goes something like this. So for example, if you consider a data set, like consider Earth as your data set, you have to store all the information and you have to divide them in a particular tile. So let's see how MapReduce will actually work. So the first step would be that it will take only a partial amount of data, only a small subsection. Let's say it took only India, and now it wants to divide India in various tiles. So what first it will do is that it will try to identify identify each region with a particular UID, and then it will try to merge all those UIDs and then store it in a distributed file system. For example, if MapReduce is considered, then MapReduce is Hadoop's way of doing things. So they would like to store it in HDFS. Even if you're using Spark today, this would still be there. So the first is that we now if somebody queries that kind of data, then how should we be able to do that? So each region is identified by a global index, right? For example, each region or each let's say capital of a country is uniquely identified, right? For example, if you consider Rajasthan, if you consider Delhi, they are very unique, if you consider the world as a whole, right? So let's consider that those are the indexes that we have. Let's say Delhi is an index. If you want to see, if I want to check like what is the nearest bookstore, so Delhi is the index where the query which should boil down to ultimately. or percolates to. So the first thing that we will do is that we will actually take the smallest amount of data. For example, we'll take India, and then then we try to identify various different global indices there by the help of filtering. Now, filtering can be achieved by these MBRs. So these square boxes, which I told you. So those MBRs will actually help us identify. So we need to check which MBR or which rectangle consists Delhi, right? And then we go to that rectangle, and then we try to divide that rectangle again in and choose the most shortest distance, the rectangle which has the most shortest distance, and then we choose that rectangle. So consider it like traversing a binary heap, right? If you want to find a number, which is smaller than a particular number, like how would you store it in a binary tree, in the same way you retrieve it from the binary tree. So the processing is almost similar but a little bit more complex, because the way to deal with data is a little bit complex in terms of spatial data. So yeah. So next up is the effective spatial data partitioning, and how can we, utilize this spatial data partitioning? How can we do that? So there are two challenges. First is spatial objects are extant. As I said, Earth revolves, and so does our satellites. It's not possible, at least for us, to match the speed of Earth at this point of time, because that would be really difficult. So either your satellites are stationary or they keep moving, then they move at a little bit, because they move at a little slower speed than is expected, obviously. So spatial objects are extent. That is that the spatial objects, for example, a country would change its shape, right? In case if you use a fixed grid partitioning, for example, in this case, like if this is that fixed grid, right? This region which is residing here may not reside here if the revolution is fast forwarded to, let's say, 1 hour or 2 hour. That may translate to this region as well. In this case, the fixed grid partitioning would suffer, and you would actually need to reread the data at each interval of time, considering storing the data at each interval of each interval. For example, at the at the interval of 1 hour or so, right? So this is really tough. And then we have the fixed grid partitioning, which is skew averse. Both of these problems are interrelated. So as I said, like fixed grid partitioning is skew averse. That means with fixed grids, it is already presupposed that the shapes will not change, right? And skewing is the phenomena where your shapes change or they are irregular with time. This is the usual case with any kind of real data that we see. Even the data that you're reading from any of the IoT devices. So IoT devices rely on real inputs that they are getting from the world, and that output is not following a pattern, right? That output is random, and that input is actually based on various scenarios. It is based on, let's say, your political rules, or whatever the rules that we have so far. So it bases itself on that, and it reads the data and just tries to dedicate it to a particular type. So there are approaches in terms of making the partitioning effective. So the first one is called MASJ, which is multi-assign and a single join. Ultimately, in order to answer your queries, you will have to join multiple tables. That is a given, right? That has to be done, because nobody will ask what is the capital of India. But that is the most easiest query to answer, right? So that would not require a join. But what would require a join is if you would like to know the nearest restaurants, if you want to know what's the traveling distance or the duration it will take from me to reach from Delhi to Pune right now. So those kind of things would require a join. So there are two ways to do that. First one is MASJ, which is multi-assign and a single join. With multi-assign, if there are overlapping regions, then you store them in those files again. Yeah, that means you will duplicate those regions in each tile wherever it is applicable. So when you're trying to join those tiles, right? So you would only have to, whenever you know want to query, now if you want to query that particular region, so now you know that it resides in duplicate tiles, right? So in order to do that, you will only have to use only one single tile, because you know the same type of data resists in the other tile. You don't have to actually, you know, process it again. But if you consider that you are joining two different tiles and they have like common data, then you have to do the double processing in order to just deduplicate that data, right? If you remember set theory, if there is like a common area which is shared by two circles, then you have to eliminate the common area in order to find the actual union or the total, right? So with mass j, with multi assign, there is both storage cost available, sorry, storage cost which is incurred, and also the processing cost which is also incurred on the system or on your architecture. With SAMJ, the single assign and multi join. With single assign, if there are overlapping regions, then you assign them to a single plot only on the single tile, and you don't replicate that data. So in terms of join, if you join the tiles now, you will only have only that data, only no, there won't be any replication, so you don't have to actually eliminate any kind of data. But the thing is, if you're missing, if the tile that you're querying does not have that data, you would have to actually look up to the tiles which will have that data. This will actually incur the cost on the processing itself. Processing can be solved with the help of CPU cores and GPUs, which is much more easier to solve than the than you know aiming to solve with both incurring the cost for processing and memory as well. That's really going to be a hard time to solve. So SAMJ is MassJ is something which is considered by Hadoop right now. So Hadoop has an alternative which uses this. So for example, this Hadoop GIS, which is their geographical data, which if you want to process that data, then Hadoop has the solution for this, which uses MassJ approach. And Spatial Hadoop, which is another alternative to process your spatial data, and it also utilizes MassJ approach. Uh, the way to query, though, it's a little bit different, because that's their own, what do you call it? That's their own recipe to do this, so, which is not publicly shared, obviously. So, but all in all, the partitioning is done using MassJ. So next up we have is data skew problem. The state data skew problem means that the data is irregular and will change with respect to time, which we are not aware about, right? So there is an algorithm which is proposed and it is being used heavily, called Sato. So Sato has this ability to partition your data in balanced amount and distribute that in with tiles, and keeping sure that each tile has a very balanced amount of data. Like if you want to partition your geospatial dataset, then you would distribute this data into different set of tiles, and this algorithm will make sure that the data is evenly balanced, that it should not have irregularities, right? So the steps included in order to process in Sato is this. First of all, we will sample the data, we'll analyze the data, then we tier it and optimize the storage. With sample, you take only the small fraction of the data set, right? If you have like a global distribution, as I said, like if you consider Earth, you will consider only a small amount of data. Let's say you took Asia as an example. So you will take Asia, and now you will divide it in multiple fractions. So you will divide it in saying like, okay, Southeast Asia, North Asia, East, West, those kind of Asia, different portions of Asia are there, right? Now what you will do is that you will analyze now each of the samples. Now you'll have to analyze. So here we have to segregate the data points evenly to distribute among the plots. So we have four plots, or if you consider northwest and southeast as well, then we have almost like double eight plots we have. Now in 8 plots, you have to divide your data according to the locations they are in. So now we will, now on the scale of only saying, let's say we have only 4 regions, north, east, southwest. So we will first distribute our data in these particular regions. Now we'll dig a little bit more deeper. Now this is called where we this is achieved only by analysis. Now let's say if you take into consideration South Asia, so now you will take South Asia and whatever the regions that are available in South Asia, let's say India is also there. So now you will divide the South Asian region more, more let's say, um uh, much more grain now. Your division would be much more grain now. Now your south region will be divided further into south north, southwest, southeast, and south, so on. So now you will further allocate the small data plots into those buckets, right? So there is a bucket, and it also has another set of bucket. So once we see that our data is evenly distributed, I guess somebody is pinging me. Is that you guys? Okay. Right. So now once we did the division on sub buckets as well, now we'll keep the metadata information of each bucket. So this metadata will now be stored in the memory. Whenever we are answering any question or whenever we are answering any queries, this metadata will be considered in order to optimize the query, right? So as you see with Elasticsearch, it has multiple data nodes, and the master nodes and the coordinator nodes now keep these metadata information segregated among different levels. For example, master node consists of the information like how many data nodes it has, and at what data node you will find what will you find. So now that that thing is delegated to coordinator nodes. Coordinator nodes consist of information like how many data nodes I can control and what kind of information do they have, which is uniquely identified by using hashes or any of the unique identifiers. So whenever you throw your query to these textual search engines, what they do is they read your query. They read your query and they throw it exactly by considering the coordinators, because they have information according the coordinates. So these coordinators will check for the actual location or actual attributes that you would want to query for, and according to the attributes it will actually select the appropriate portion or appropriate, let's say, data node to get the answer from. It could be the primary shard as well, or it could be the replica as well. So that is only that this is a speed up, because the traditional way of answering this is actually scanning through each data node and finding the ones which can answer the question, which is not a very good approach, right? So this metadata indexing is required in order to answer your queries much faster, right? I hope you understand this one. So what I will plan, like what I would like to, extend this discussion into, not extend the discussion, but also, take these algorithms, also write some interactive blogs on it. So those will make sense more there. Like once people see like how is it happening with respect to, diagrams and so on. So so these are the approaches which are being used in order to handle your partitioning problems, and also to handle the challenges with your what do you call it, data sleep, right? So the spatial Hadoop and all the Hadoop systems, even Spark is one of those systems which can handle this kind of problem. So they are utilizing these algorithms and these approaches in order to tackle partitioning and also handling and answering queries. So they are utilizing a data structure called R trees. So R trees is one of the most effective data structure if you will find today. This data structure allows you to segregate your textual data in terms of blocks. Like for example, if you consider, if you take input from, let's say, uh, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and you would like to know at which level, or at which if you want to divide your dialogues in terms of who said it. For example, if let's say Romeo said these dialogues, Juliet said these dialogues, the doctor said these dialogues, and his father, and so on. So all those divisions are, for example, for us now, it seems on one level it is Romeo will be a square in which there will be dialogues or portions or scenes wherever he was. Now, if we further divide Romeo, then you will see in what chapters did Romeo come in. So let's say chapter 1 he came in, chapter 3 he didn't come in, so we will eliminate chapter 3 from it. So you develop sub buckets on the basis of this. R tree is one of the most finest and one of the most effective data structure in order to help you with this. It is similar to B star tree or B trees that we had, which answered the questions like sorting our numbers and so on in log base of 2 time. Similarly, R tree is one of the data structure which tries to answer these complex queries regarding spatial data or unstructured data in log m of n time, where m is the base of your division of different childs and n is the total number of nodes or the height of your tree, which is a very effective tree if you consider the alternatives out there. In order to, if you go ahead and try to write one of your own algorithms, you will see that it's not very effective if you consider, dividing on the basis of a uh, particular attribute. So the challenges with the algorithms which try to, divide your data is that they fail to recognize these attributes. Sometimes some of the attributes are very unique in a particular data. For example, the name of countries are unique, so that thing we can use in order to, segregate your data. That could be the key, right, in order to divide your data. Further, you can divide it by their capitals, their different states, and so on. So those things can be used, right? But if you consider the real data, consider the real data which is coming from people, it's not so unique. I mean, the name of people are not unique as well. If I have Sudeep here, then Sudeep is somewhere also, and Sudeep James Tirki may be one of the most unique person if you consider, but the name is identical, right? You can find another Sudeep James Tirki, but if you boil down to the character saying, let's say, okay, let's Sudeep lives here, and as soon as you boil down to his characteristic attributes, you will find that as you have to go a little bit more deeper in order to, uniquely identify Sudeep James Tirki that right? So these algorithms suffer from that. So this suffering can only be solved by the memory you have, because the effective way of dealing with the querying is dependent upon the file system you are basing your infrastructure on, or sorry, the application on. For example, if I can tell you the one of the scenarios. So Nimble probably is one of the, I guess, if Abhishek remembers, like Nimble is one of the applications which is hosted on sorry, not Nimble. They have Symfony. Symfony is one of the APIs which they host on DCS nodes, right? So those DCS nodes have a file system which is based upon mounting the disks, right? So these are internet connected disks. That means these are NFS servers. They want to query and get the response. The query and get the response is dependent upon the cost between the memory, the main memory, and the disk, because you want to query, right? So the data will come from the disk itself, right? And there is a cost which is limited by the bandwidth between the disk and the memory. So the speed at which the data is coming from your disk to memory is very critical in this in you know responding to the queries. If the network is slower that day, then probably the API will suffer a lot that day, right, and won't be able to actually answer. So the requirement here is that you place your disk in the same region as your node is, or in a region where the network speed is a lot higher than and the traditional ones. So now co-processing with GPU and CPUs. This is the heterogeneous architecture that people are proposing. I believe this is being used by some of the projects that we have here, which are utilizing IoT. Even HP is utilizing these. They have GPUs and CPUs at the top level where they are trying to read their data from IoT, and those servers have these capabilities of handling the data at at a threaded level, and then transfer it to to the further levels down the pipeline. Now, high cores gives you parallel processing. That's that's there. So this is why you would like to have these kind of nodes. So this is one of the this is one of the suggestions that has been given by the community, that if you want to have a big data application, that you should consider having GPUs added to your nodes as well. This is one of the good practices, because GPUs are much higher in terms of core rather than CPUs. CPUs can give you multi cores, but those cores may not be enough. Like GPUs come with a higher amount of cores than CPUs today. But there is a challenge with GPU and that heterogeneous architecture, and that is called task assignment. If you have read about OS, so we have heard about round robin task assignment, FIFO task assignment, which is really, really easy. But if you consider an architecture which is a mix of CPU and GPU, then that thing becomes really tough, as in there is no way for the algorithm to, to actually optimize it in a way that it should consider CPU only or GPU only. So there is a requirement that there should be a query optimizer which should be hardware sensitive. This query optimizer will take in the task, right? And it will try to first see, like, where tries to first see which component, either CPU or GPU, which component would be much better, or which component would provide us with a higher throughput, right? Now there is a challenge here. For example, if we just mindlessly, let's say we do not have a query optimizer, so there is a task which does not require much processing. So if you give it to CPU, it will be finished within, let's say, 0.03 seconds. If you give it to GPUs, this would be finished within 0.0001 seconds, right? So the thing is, 0.03 and 0.01 is not much of a gain in terms of throughput, if you consider, because that is a very minimal gain, right? So that's not very effective also, because that will block your task from further gaining the GPUs. Let's say if some high cost computation task comes in and you fail to give it to GPUs, and rather we miscalculated and gave it to CPUs, then that would not be a very advantageous scenario for us. So there is a need for a query optimizer which should be hardware sensitive. Thankfully, most of the frameworks that we use, called Hadoop and Spark, come with that pre-aligned in it. So, but the thing is, we are not yet comfortable with using those architectures where we have CPU and GPUs. Also, there is one more need of, there is an application of machine learning which uses predictive modeling. So in Hadoop, this is being used. I'm guessing Spark also uses this. What they do is they take the task assignment data and they use the 10% data in order to learn about the environment they are in, and what kind of throughputs they are getting. For example, if there are numerous tasks in a day, so they take the 100 tasks in a day, they take the 10% out of it, they take the 10 tasks and see like where they are getting deployed and what's their throughput. On the basis of those throughputs, right, so they will extract the information, like if I give this particular task A, oh sorry, type of task A to GPU, I'll get a much more better throughput than B. Then that is a very effective decision, right? So this particular thing is the need in most of the modern frameworks, and this should be provided right now. Like Hadoop is providing us with this, and Spark is also providing us with this. So with big data application, that's why those are known for their application this much, and their processing speed is actually dependent upon these task assignment, which is really, really critical. Next is task granularity. So the task granularity consists of the amount of tasks which you are trying to transfer to a GPU or a CPU. Here we are considering the heterogeneous architecture, right? So the data shipped to GPU means that you are incurring the IO cost. Why is this the IO cost? Because the transfer between CPU and GPU is much more light. I mean, the bandwidth there, the speed at which you transports between CPU and GPU is much higher, because they are knit together very closely. But if you consider the cost of memory from disk, it's much more it's much more lower. The bandwidth there is much more lower. So whenever a task is getting transferred to GPU, there is an IO cost. So we would like to have the memory to the main memory to have a high storage capacity, so where we can actually store the data regarding the task that we have, or we can build the queue from there. So one thing that we need to make sure that is very critical here is that the compute to transfer ratio should be high if you're using GPU. Like for example, the amount of data that you're transferring and the amount of data that is to be computed should be really high. If your computation is higher and your transfer is lower, it's much better that way, because your computation rate is much more higher. So even if you one day there are irregularities and the transfer rate is higher, your compute rate will actually handle the case. But if the case is any more opposite, that means when the compute rate is much lower, in the case where you're using only CPU cores, that's where the compute rate will be slower and the transfer rate is higher. Then this is the case where the application will start to suffer, which is the most common case in most of the scenarios. So boiling down to this, so these are the challenges that we are facing with this big data applications. So the next phase of this is that I will talk about various different storage mechanisms where we can gain the processing speed from, because storage is critical not only in terms of size but in terms of the file structure, all the the file system that is employed there. So though there are certain recommendations when we are trying to scale our architecture and trying to build big data applications. So I will try to explore that scenario and see whatever I can find in terms of this. So this has been so far my research on not my I'm not I would not like to call it research, but whatever this I could find out there in terms of the knowledge I had. So this is it. Thank you very much for joining. And if you have any questions, you're now free to ask.